Rafic, Dimitri, welcome. Alar, welcome. Looking forward to hearing all of your insights. It's a bit of a crazy time in the industry, to say the least. Everything from AI to IoT to cybersecurity, all the work that's basically being done. It would be phenomenal for you to be able to talk about that, and we'll try and make sure we get some audience questions as well. With that, take it away.
I'm Rafic. He's Dimitri.
I know.
Okay.
Yeah, okay, that's fine. Okay. Rafic, Ahlan wa sahlan. Welcome.
Okay.
Sound good? Okay,
Good.
fantastic. All right, great.
So welcome, everybody. We have a fantastic panel for you. We're going to talk about convergence. And if you think about it, if we've learned anything from the history of technology, is that disruptive innovation is always, time and time again, always associated with convergence, the coming together of sometimes desperate technologies, diverse technologies. From the invention of the integrated circuit in 1959 to the internet, to smartphones and the tremendous impact on society, convergence has always made a tremendous difference in our lives. And today we're going to talk about convergence of AI and IoT. And we have two very distinguished panelists with us, Fox and Dimitri. And I'll let them introduce themselves, starting with Fox.
Sure. Hey, everybody. Is this thing on? There we go. Hey, my name is Fox. I'm the founder of my family office, Next Global Capital, where we invest in deep tech across defense, biotech, aviation, and energy. You heard from one of our amazing companies today, Plan A, the first male birth control, and super happy to dive in today and discussing the convergence of cybersecurity with our daily lives in a very physical world.
And Dimitri?
Test it. Oh, looks like it's not working. Test. Hi, my name is Dimitri Zabelin. I head AI and cybersecurity research at PitchBook. Before this, I did geopolitical risk consulting for a firm I founded called Pantheon Insights, and I've been working with data, geopolitics, and frontier technologies and markets for most of my career. And a lot of the research I've been starting to do is on AI, the edge, and IoT. So yeah, really excited to be speaking with all of you here today.
Thank you. And my first question is to you, Fox. I remember in 2012, analysts were saying that IoT at scale will be with us in about a decade. It will be a $12 trillion impact on the economy. That hasn't happened, right? And here we're going to talk about the convergence of IoT and AI. Why do you think, what went wrong? What's missing from the puzzle to make it happen at scale?
For sure. I think it really comes down to understanding IoT. And so when you go back to the early 2010s, the idea of IoT was smart cities, right? We're going to have all these sensors everywhere, and everything's going to be calculated, and there's going to be all this data inflow. And I think that as we take a step back, we realize IT looks in some ways extremely different. And if we humble ourselves, we realize it looks actually quite what was expected, just in different ways. So let's just do a quick poll here in terms of IoT. Because I think when we talk about IoT, it still kind of feels like quantum to the general public. It's kind of like this faraway thing that we know is going to come. It has some impact on our lives. But it's very much real and here today. So just in a very practical sense, who has a camera at their home, a digital wirelessly connected camera? Right? We got a few people. Okay, who has one in their home? As looking, okay, right? Maybe looking in like as a baby monitor, right? And so like this is a very real use of IoT that's in our lives. Pretty much everybody put their hands up. And that's just one small example. And when we talk about cybersecurity, when it comes to IoT, it becomes very pertinent. It's not just, are there bad actors that are going to hack some sensor system that's in a smart city? We're talking about people being able to listen and view into our most intimate moments of our lives. That's very real and here today. And it looks a little different than what was projected, which IoT was mostly seen as more of an industrial application back in like early 2010s when we first started innovating in the space. But it's very much here, and we'll dive into what those implications are and why it's so important, because how you actually interface with IoT is very different than your phone, right? You get to update your phone, you update your computer, but with these devices, that very simple means of ensuring that the security is being kept updated is very difficult. And so it leaves these open threat vectors in just the most simplest form of security.
And Dimitri, if we think about IoT and the marriage of IoT with AI, and if we think about edge devices, right? Perhaps doing real-time machine learning at the edge. Are we there? Can we do that today? And if not, what's missing? What are the challenges there?
Yeah, so I think part of the reason why we haven't seen that $12 trillion rollout of IoT has three reasons, and I'd be curious to get your opinion on it. I think one of the reasons is there is asymmetric return on IoT depending on the sector and industry. So if it's within consumer and retail, it's not as high as, for instance, aerospace, defense, industrial manufacturing. I think the second reason why, and this kind of ties into Edge AI, is more recently we have seen how developments in specific chips that are optimized for both energy and compute on these very small devices, because it would be impractical to have a power-hungry, massive GPU on like a tiny camera. We're seeing innovation in chip development, Edge AI, which I think is going to expedite the overall rollout of Edge AI and IoT. The third reason is you also had, and that was partially due, I didn't mention this, to the fact that because we're able now to run inference locally rather than have to send it to the cloud, you then have a reduced latency risk. So that's going to probably accelerate Edge AI rollout. I would say those would be the two primary reasons, is the asymmetric returns and the developments we're seeing in chips. And there's a third reason that's escaping me right now, but I'd be curious to hear your opinion on it.
Yeah, just following on that, to emphasize my point here is I think IoT is dead, right? IoT is so ubiquitous that itself as a category is gone, right? When we think about our cars and how connected they are and all of these things that were mentioned here that Dimitri said, right? They're so integrated into our daily lives that it's just an afterthought. It's not its own category, right? How many people have smart thermometers, right? Or these other devices that connect, right? Practically everything you buy is smart, right? It has some level of connectivity. Even today, we were giving little air tags, right? Just that piece of technology that's able to connect us to our physical property that were given away for free at the great cost from Transform. But still, like this connectivity exists so intrinsically in our lives because those chips have gotten so much cheaper, and a lot of that is due to the connectivity that we see just on our 4G and LTE networks, not even on 5G, which is going to further democratize access to these small chips that have high bandwidth capability.
One thing that I was going to add, I've remembered the third reason, is it has to do with the kind of vendors, and it has to specifically do with how the focus initially was on let's build out IoT within these very specific verticals. But the problem with that is that the focus was more so on vertical optimization, not on horizontal scalability. Now, to speak English and not SF tech speak, what basically that means is they were focusing too much on building within a specific industry, within a specific vendor, within that ecosystem, and not having interoperability between these devices across sectors and industry. So you had a fragmented system. Along with the balkanization of the internet, you had data silos, which then inhibited this mass scaling, essentially. I think that was like a key role.
And when we talk about edge anything, security comes to mind, vulnerabilities come to mind. Is it too soon to start thinking about that subject, or are we doing design for security at this stage for edge devices? Is it as part of the design? Should it be as part of the actual designing next generation edge systems, or is it something that we feel more comfortable with doing afterwards?
I can answer this really quickly, and I'd love to hear your insights on it. But in short, I think it's something you need to integrate with it, because with more IoT devices, with more edge devices, yes, you have more connectivity, but then that also means you have more vectors of attack, which then means you need to scale AI, or rather you need to scale IoT and edge devices only as so far as the cybersecurity architecture you have will enable it. And this, in my view, is a symbiotic relationship between AI native cybersecurity companies that are able to plug in these security risks. And I think that you can't scale it up, especially in sensitive industries like aerospace, defense, or even some industrial manufacturing, without the without those cybersecurity protocols in place.
Absolutely. So the aspect there that I think you really highlighted is that there's a lot more touch points into IoT devices. The second piece of that is also the implications. If we think about security, right, for thousands of years, us as humans, when we thought about security, we thought about two things: big walls and pointy things, all right, to keep people away from things that you didn't want them to come to. That was physical security. We've gone really clever with it, and we got things that are really pointy and explosive and bigger walls, and we got all these things. But that's physical security at its core. Then come the 80s, right? That's really with the development of cybersecurity, which is how do we protect and build walls of our data, right? The ones and zeros. How do we protect that? How do we protect our data? Now, IoT is really the birth of an entire new security paradigm, and that's cyber-physical security. How do we protect an inherently digital and inherently physical object? Because those have not just additional implications for how they can be attacked, but they have more consequences, right? You can hack into a bank, you can steal money, that's bad. We got a lot of companies working on that, great. You can steal personal identifiable information, great, that's bad, we shouldn't do that. But when you talk about physical security, how does it look when you can hack into a drone? What does it look like when you can hack into somebody's baby monitor, into somebody's AirTag, into somebody's phone? Right? These devices that we are so integrated with in just this room, right? The cameras that sit in this room, the timer that sits there. All of these devices have very real physical implications for us as humans in a way that is completely different than the traditional approach to cybersecurity. And that's why there's so much innovation that's happening, and yet we are so stupidly young in the cyber-physical security realm, and there's actually very little companies that are working in this, and why it's so desperately needed. Because it's complete paradigm shift from traditional physical security and from traditional cybersecurity. We're not protecting ones and zeros, we're protecting our very literal lives.
And a follow-up questions to both. I mean, we're in San Francisco. Waymo is all over the place, which you can think of it as an edge device, right? A robot on wheels. And there's also security and physical security concerns there. What other applications do you see coming next of this merger of AI and IoT, the non-existent IoT?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, I think we were just talking about this earlier, but I think defense is going to be one of the biggest ones. And the reason why, a good example of this is the startup Anduril. Their devices embed edge AI so that when they're on the battlefield, it'll give them an edge, quite literally in that sense. And the idea there is that if you can run inference locally and you can run these programs that can make you more effective on the battlefield, that can give you an asymmetric advantage over your enemy, that'll certainly be something that the government is interested in and is funding too. And you're seeing the defense sector in particular have record-breaking deal volumes and counts. And we can get into that perhaps a little bit later. But I think you'd see it there. And I think you're seeing increasing interest in industrial and manufacturing, specifically in automobiles. I know Europe is undertaking some measures to implement more IoT devices, more edge devices, where before even a part goes bad, it can monitor it to say, okay, this part's beginning to go bad. We are now going to place an order so that by the time it does go bad, it arrives and it's able to be replaced. So in short, I think it's defense and manufacturing.
Fox?
Yeah, it's interesting, as Dimitri pointed out, there's a big shift is one of the solutions to the cyber-physical security vulnerability of this broad industry is putting that compute and the decision-making on the edge, as Dimitri pointed out, especially in the defense space. What is, I think, the fun thing about security is it's a cat and mouse game. There's no solution, right? As soon as one side innovates, the other side will quickly iterate as well. And so what we've already seen, and without going into too much confidential detail, but state actors are already starting to poison the training data that's being used in these defense applications, because it allows you to very quietly integrate into the actual decision making of these devices. And this is what's happening today in Ukraine, for example, with autonomous drones, right? Where the actual AI platforms that are being used and integrated into the drones to try to cut out that layer that would allow for interference is being sabotaged at its core. And that is really, I think, something that we're going to have to continue to face as we all become and integrate AI into our daily lives in very direct ways, but also in ways that we don't even realize that AI is actually behind the scenes making some of the most important decisions of our lives, who interfaced with it and potentially sabotaged its decision-making abilities.
And Dimitri, as with any transformative technology, there's always a geopolitical dimension to it, right? How do you see this shaping up for IoT together with AI, this next big transformation that's going to happen?
So I think what you're going to see, and you're already seeing this now, is a great bifurcation between a China-led hemisphere and a US/European-led hemisphere. And security is the primary directive here. Where the focus now amongst companies and countries, and there's this convergence, is you are optimizing for geopolitical risk minimization, not economic efficiency. And because if that were the case, then a lot of the policies we're seeing now vis-a-vis rare earth minerals and metals, it's far more economically efficient to have China refine it. But because that poses a security risk, and there are several years of precedence of them leveraging it against the US, naturally we are de-risking, not decoupling. So that's a fancy new euphemism we started to use, but functionally it's the same. I think what you're going to then happen is that you're going to have countries essentially have to align. They're not going to really be able to be a middle power. There are some that have some leverage, like Brazil, that exercises strategic neutrality. But there are going to be very few countries, especially on the technological front, where it's very sensitive, as you alluded to earlier. They can even poison the data that we're using and put sleeper algorithms in there that can lie in wait for years even before they can be optimized for the right moment if there's a strike or an attack, et cetera. I think then what you're going to see is an ecosystem built out within the West and within, let's say, a China-led hemisphere, where you will have internal security protocols and data be siloed that will stay within those regions. And you won't have as much data transmission, which of course is a big point of friction because that's the basis for a lot of innovations, the basis for a lot of data-driven insights. But the geopolitics will play an asymmetric role, not just in IoT, but AI, other technologies and industries, more so from here on out than over the past, let's say, pre-2016, pre-2015 decades going back to the Cold War even, I would argue.
We have a few minutes left, and I want to close with two quick questions. The first is, if you look at convergence as a big shaper of our future, what do you think the most significant question to ask today that history will come back in 50 years and say, boy, this was the most significant piece of that? Question to both of you.
You go first. I've been talking a lot.
I'll take that, which I think one of the really fun things to look at when you're trying to figure out like who's trying to work against the interests of the U.S. is to look at what are the companies and industries that are being subsidized by foreign governments, including the Chinese government, as just an example. So I mentioned baby monitors, right? Baby monitors, cheap cameras that you have for home security. Not to make anybody paranoid, but just ask yourself, why would the Chinese government subsidize that so they can sell them below cost? Just put that out there, right? These very simple things, the decisions that we individually make in our daily lives that invites in sensors and data and IoT that is ultimately sending data to a foreign server. Now, that's for you all to decide individually. What does that mean for yourselves? But there's a very real decision that not just impact us as a country in big purchasing decisions, but in our individual lives. What are the companies being subsidized by foreign governments, and why do they see that as a strategic investment?
Excellent.
Yeah, and the last point I'll make is that a lot of decision making that you're going to be seeing being implemented by policymakers is in large part not going to be an economic argument. It's going to be a security one. And that is a global paradigm shift in how we think, particularly in the US.
Super. And last question. What are the 2 to 3 major takeaways that you want the audience, that you want to leave with the audience about this topic? Start with you, Fox.
Yeah, I think the key thing is that I think we need to humble ourselves when we realize that we are so inherently connected to the wider world. Our devices, everything we carry, everything we do is being tracked, is being seen. Now the question is, who is on the receiving end? What are their intentions? Maybe it's friendly intentions, right? Maybe it's not. But really understanding, because you are making a decision to opt in to all of these conveniences that we use every single day.
Yeah, and the last point I'll make is that geopolitics are going to play an asymmetric role in private and public market activity. And the last one with AI, IoT, edge, quantum, reality is about to get a lot weirder. Those are the 2 takeaways I would like to leave you guys with.
Those are great. Fox, Dimitri, thank you so much. And thank you.